Welcome to the Choir Conductor podcast. Each episode features a conversation with people in the choir or music education profession. I am your host, Zach Thompson. Let's start the show. My guest today is Lindsay Pope. Lindsay is a doctoral candidate in choral conducting at the University of North Texas, where she directed concert choir and currently serves as assistant conductor of university singers. She is also the conducting associate to the Dallas Symphony Chorus, for which her work as chorus master was praised as exemplary and well-prepared. From 2009 to 2016, Lindsay served as director of choral ensembles and lecturer in music at Mount Holyoke College, where she conducted the Glee Club, Choral, and Chamber Singers, and taught undergraduate conducting. Lindsay, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we met each other at the Halifax Summer Choral Conducting Symposium.
And now they've shortened their name, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Made it a little easier, yeah.
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 But so we both were part of that in Canada, and it was amazing to be in Canada in the summer, especially that area.
Beautiful.
But we both got to work with Dr. Sparks, who you now are studying under at the University of North Texas. So that's kind of pretty cool that it all came full circle for you there.
Yeah, I mean, I met him at that program, and I thought I was actually going to go to another school at the time, but I really enjoyed working with him, and it kind of piqued my interest in the program. And so he invited me for an audition, and I went, and it ended up being a really great fit for me. So it was really serendipitous.
Yeah, and that's amazing just that 1 week of experience kind of changed your whole trajectory of your career path.
It did. Yeah, it totally did.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk about your experience so far with UNT and the Dallas Symphony Chorus, but let's start with you talking about your musical upbringing.
Sure. So I come from a musical family, actually. My great aunt, Ida, who actually just passed on this past year at the age of 99, but she was a concert pianist, and she was the head of the piano department at Boston University for many, many years. And so she had a career as a musician. She was the breadwinner in her family. She never had any children, but she had a husband who was also was a voice teacher. But so she did that. My grandmother always sang. And so my mother always grew up around music. And when she had myself and my two little sisters, it was really important to her that we all play a musical instrument for at least 12 years. That was non-negotiable. So I got assigned the piano, and my sisters they had the violin and the cello, and it was her dream that we would play trios together. It's kind of like a 19th century salon. So I kind of grew up always having family concerts around the holidays. We were always performing at all family gatherings. And I sang in a choir for 10 years as well, a children's choir from third grade until I graduated from high school, and studied private voice when I was a teenager. So music was a part of my home for sure, thanks to my mom. My dad calls himself the benefactor of the arts and the audience member. And he's been very supportive as well of my career and my pursuit of music.
Yeah, and that's great. Well, we always need both benefactors and audience members, so that's
right.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when was the moment that you decided that you want to pursue music as a career?
Right. So that didn't come till later. So I'll say, as a child, because I think music was just a part of my upbringing, I wasn't as passionate about it. I had to go away to college, and as most young adults do, have to get away from my family to figure out what I really liked and what was exciting to me. And so it was really when I went away to school. I went to a liberal arts school, And I thought about going to a conservatory. I got in for voice to BU, College of Fine Arts, but I decided on a liberal arts school, Mount Holyoke College, where I then taught later, because I loved English and religion and philosophy, and I actually thought I was going to come out of there and be a writer. But strangely enough, I found myself taking all the music classes and realized that that was what I really truly loved to do. And what really turned me on to directing, especially, was being the director of my college a cappella group, the V8s, which is the oldest continuing female group in the country. So it was probably a combination of just getting away from home, studying music on my own, getting to know it for myself, and then also participating in a musical ensemble where there were leadership opportunities for students is what really turned me on to music making.
Sure. And so you got the position as director of the V8s, and before that, had you had any experience leading an ensemble?
No, I mean, not that I can think of. And even at that time when I was in college, actually, I thought that I was going to be a singer. That was the path that seemed most obvious to me. My mother was an amateur singer growing up. She had her own little opera company, and I used to turn pages for my great aunt who would play for her at the piano growing up. So I that was more familiar to me, was singing, and I loved singing. Um, and also, to be honest, like as a woman, I didn't have as many role models in the field of conducting, so it just didn't occur to me that I could be a conductor until my senior year of college. My the previous director retired in 2006, and then my senior year of college, we had a young woman come in as the new director. I think she was only 24 or 25 at the time. We didn't know she was that young, but she was really inspiring to me. And it was the first time in my life I looked at someone and kind of saw myself in her. And it was my senior year. I took conducting with her, honestly, just because I was bored and didn't have enough credits my last semester of college,
Nice.
and ended up loving it and loving studying with her too. And that was the first time that I thought, oh wow, maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to be a conductor.
That's great. And
Yeah.
then so you start to enjoy the conducting process. You see a positive role model from this woman. What was the transition to then go on to get your master's?
Mm. So the funny thing about conducting, I think, is that, of course, it's not taught. Well, many schools don't really teach it very much at the undergraduate level. You can take like a couple conducting courses, but that's about all you get. Unless you're, I wasn't music ed. I think if you're a music education major, you tend to, I would imagine you would get a little bit more
Yes.
experience. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that wasn't my experience. And so then once I was thought I want to be a conductor, I thought, how the heck am I going to learn what I need to learn to get into graduate school? So what I ended up doing is, well, first I took a year off in between college and pursuing conducting, and that was my soul searching year where I really confirmed this is what I want to do. And then I approached my teacher at Mount Holyoke, Kim, and said to her, I really want to come back and study with you. Is there any way we could create a position for me where I do help you with your administrative work, and in return I get lessons with you and podium time? And she had actually been talking about creating a position like that, unbeknownst to me, with the chair of the department. So now at Mount Holyoke, we have this position that's called the choral assistant, which is exactly what I said. And I was offered that position a year after graduating. So I came back almost in a post-bac year where I had a stipend and, a very small stipend, but it was enough to live on. And I helped her with all of the choral administration. And then in turn, I got lessons with her and I got podium time in front of one of the ensembles. And I worked on sectionals and really got to know what it was like to be in a music department and run a choral program. And with that experience, I got the footage that I needed to apply to graduate school. So I really, honestly, Zach, I had only been conducting, I want to say, for about 6 months when I applied to graduate school.
Yeah,
It was like a fast track. I just kind of went for it, and it worked out for me. But I didn't know much when I applied. You know?
sure. And
Yeah,
that sounds like a very excellent kind of win-win position. You know, you get the training almost like an apprenticeship, and
right.
then the director doesn't have to do so much of the administrative stuff that can just bog down the job, and that sounds amazing.
Exactly. I mean, I think it was a win-win, and the position still exists at Mount Holyoke. So when I was there, I had assistants working for me, and that was fun. It was almost practice of having like a master's student too. It gave me that kind of experience, and now actually there's so much interest in conducting at Mount Holyoke that it's a shared position between current students, because there are people that are already serious about going to graduate school, even when they're sophomores and juniors. So it was a position that blessed me, but it's also created an opportunity for current Mount Holyoke students to to be leaders within the field of conducting and in music. So.
That's great. Yeah. So you then go to Westminster Choir College.
Hmm.
You get your master's degree, and then you end up back at your alma mater as a professor.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that more or less right?
yeah, that's exactly it. So, yep, that year at Mount Holyoke as the choral assistant, and then 2 years at Westminster Choir College. And then it just so happened that my teacher, whom I loved, was got a position in the Midwest and decided to take it. And there was a position that needed to be filled. I knew I would never qualify for the permanent position, but they ended up looking for an interim, and that's how students with their masters can get in the back door. I
Hmm.
think
Yeah,
into a college program, and then it becomes a little bit a game of who you know, right? So
sure.
um, so I came well recommended, and they all knew me, so that I'm sure that didn't hurt. But yeah, it worked out really well to go back there.
And that's great. And if I remember, it's all women's choir. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's an all women's college. I want to say it's about 2,200, so a small women's college. And I had three choirs there. I had a beginning level ensemble called Choral, which was anywhere between 40 and 60 when I was there. And then the Glee Club, which was the premier ensemble of 40 women. And the Chamber Singers was an elite ensemble drawn from the Glee Club of 12 to 16 singers. And we mostly did early and new music.
That's great. And then, so when did you start to do these kind of traveling conducting things that was like
Like
the
that.
Halifax? Yeah.
Gosh, I'm trying to think if I even did any before Halifax. Um, I can't think of any I did off the top of my head. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Um,
But
well,
I saw that you recently worked or got to do the Oregon Bach Festival.
that was this summer. Yeah. So that is
Yeah.
definitely fresh in my mind. And that was awesome. So I did go to the Oregon Bach Festival this past summer as a conducting masterclass participant. And I got to work with Ed McClary, who's at Maryland,
Hmm.
and then Mathew Halls is the artistic director. And I got to prepare quite a large segment of the St. John Passion. So that was amazing.
Wow.
And with, a professional orchestra, a professional choir that know this piece inside and out. And yeah, wow. I mean, I don't think I've ever conducted ensembles that good before. That was amazing.
That is amazing. And we kind of have a connection with Mathew Halls. When I was in Nashville, I was in the Nashville Symphony Chorus, and he came and conducted
Oh,
Messiah,
really?
yeah, for a run. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome.
so I have a little bit of connection with him. I haven't met him personally, but I've got to sing under him, and he was fantastic.
Isn't he
Uh,
great? Yeah, he's
I
so
mean,
charismatic.
yeah, and he
But he's
did the
got the
entire
brains
thing,
to back it up.
yeah, from memory. Did the entire thing from memory,
My gosh.
all the rehearsals, everything. It was insane. Okay, and then so kind of moving on, you then go on to University of North Texas, where you currently are,
Hmm.
and you end up is it as part of your assistantship that you are the assistant conductor for the Dallas Symphony Chorus?
Yes, it is, and that position is a very unique part of the opportunity here at University of North Texas. I can't think of another school that has an
No,
opportunity like that.
that's
Yeah,
unreal. Yeah.
yeah, it really is. And of course, working with Josh Haberman, if you haven't worked with him before, he is a wonderful person and extremely gifted musician and a talented teacher. So he's just the complete package. And so it's also been great to have him as a mentor to me.
Sure. And is it from your work with the college ensembles at University of North Texas? Is there some things that you do a little bit differently with such a large amateur is not the right word, but they're not. I mean, they're not there because they necessarily have to be in
Right.
the symphony course. Is there a difference that you see in your approaches?
Oh, in like the way that I teach Dallas Symphony versus the way that I would teach a student ensemble? Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
yeah,
Um, sure. I mean, so the Dallas Symphony Chorus, as you said, it's an all volunteer chorus of about, I think right now we have around 250 members. Isn't
wow,
that, isn't that amazing? Just, and it's a huge commitment. Like, I, I can't believe these people do it for no money,
right.
but they love it. I mean, they do it because they get to perform these amazing works with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra, in the Meyerson, which is a beautiful hall, and they get to sing, and they obviously everyone who's there loves singing. So I suppose one thing I notice in the way that and particularly Josh, since he's the one doing most of the teaching, but the way that we teach is I do think you always need to be connected to the meaning behind the music. So giving historical context. For example, when we did the Brahms Requiem, Josh was always going back to the historical context of each movement, or what was going on theoretically, and uh, how Brahms was bringing certain text to life, or so almost like every rehearsal is almost a expansive program notes on on the Brahms Requiem. So I love that he does that because it's a reminder that they're not just there to kind of spit out the notes. They're also there to have a meaningful human experience. And so I would say that in my work with the Dallas Symphony Chorus, we're constantly challenged to weave those two things together. Another thing that is very important to Josh and to me when we teach them is working with different concepts. So not just saying, sing, how do I explain? Um, sing legato at measure 13. It's more like we would say, uh, a lot of Brahms requires beautiful legato singing with sustained breath. And whenever you see a passage that looks like this, we're going to want to sing every single one of those passages with a similar technique, with a similar affect. So because we're going through repertoire so quickly as well, we only rehearse once a week. Instead of just kind of micromanaging, it's all about big picture concepts that then these adults who are incredibly intelligent and there and willing to learn can then apply to the rest of the piece. And I just think that's also great teaching. So that's one way that I think it's a little different than the way that I used to teach, and I really like it. Um, I would say with the students at UNT that the pace tends to be a little bit faster, and we don't have to. I mean, trying to think how it's actually that different. I mean, because honestly, my work with the Dallas Symphony Chorus has informed how I teach at UNT, to be perfectly honest. Because even these kids that are music ed majors, um, and obviously already love music, and you don't really have to sell them on the Brahms Requiem. They already think it's awesome. Like these kids also though need because they're in the daily grind, need to be inspired every day. So even in my work with them, I am always trying to bring out the meaning behind the music through bringing out something that's going on theoretically, or the historical impact of a piece, or its cultural implications, or just the meaning of the poetry and what it means to them. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as different. I mean, the kind of student is different, but the way that I teach is pretty similar because we're all
Yeah.
human at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's gonna
Yeah.
be-
That's a great answer. Yeah. So I saw both some of UNT's choirs and the Dallas Symphony Chorus a few years back when I went to the National ACDA when it was in Dallas.
Oh,
Um,
I was there too.
yeah,
Cool.
so I mean that was my first national ACDA, and I mean it blew me away
Hmm.
the level of musicianship and it just the whole experience. You can't really prepare yourself. It was overwhelming.
Mm.
But for some of the people that might not know just how massive University of North Texas is.
Yeah, it's like 1,000 music majors, I want to say.
Yeah, I mean that's bigger
Thou-
than some colleges.
Yep. It's huge.
Yeah, and so I'm sure there's some great aspects about that, and I'm sure there's some not so great, but
Mm.
I'm sure there are just the level of different ensembles and like the intense minutia that you can get into with that kind of a bigger school that you might not be able to at any other place. Am I correct in that?
I mean, I would say so. I mean, I think for me, what's been amazing coming from a liberal arts college and then a very small choir conservatory at UNT, what I've been most impressed with is the range of talent and ability, because it's not just their choral program that's amazing. It's also their jazz program, their early music program, their orchestra. Anyhow, so for me, I look around every day and I hear music coming through the walls, and I think, gosh, there's just so much. There's so many talented people here. So and in that same vein, so when I'm working in the choral ensembles, it's true. I think that it lends itself to a particular environment where the conductor can be much pickier, and and can also we can move quite quickly through repertoire, just because music literacy in Texas is like nowhere else I've ever been.
It's unreal.
Uh,
Yeah,
it's
I hear like so I live in Florida, and
Mhm.
so we're always like kind of having this internal battle with Texas about the music and the standards and what well Texas does this, so we should do this. But yeah, I hear it's just like no other place.
Yes, especially the sight singing on solfege. I've never, I've never experienced. Just, yeah, everyone can do it and do it really well.
Yeah,
I had the third tier mixed ensemble last year, which is mostly music ed majors, primarily first years and sophomores, but some juniors and seniors in there as well. And they're smart kids. But I mean, we were able to read Palestrina almost perfectly the first time on solfege. I was just like,
nice.
hey, great.
Like yeah, only in Texas.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is sometimes when you take off the solfege and then you say, all right, now do it on a neutral syllable, it can kind of be a train wreck. So
Uh,
there's a dependency on solfege without translating it to then like intervallic relations and just kind of having internalized those. So that's been interesting to witness. But hey, like solfege is a great tool and it's very effective and it works for them. So
yeah.
yeah.
It always amazes me just the things I hear that go on in the state of Texas with music, and then you think, oh, but isn't that a red state? But they I don't know what it is. Like I've heard other podcasts and other people talk about it, but there's just something about music in Texas.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
mean, I honestly think part of it is the fact that it's a conservative state because many people here are church-going people who love choral music. So people are growing up in the churches, learning this repertoire in a way that I'm from New England, and I come from a background where there wasn't a choir in my church growing up. So I think part of it is that, and I think part of it is just tradition. Um, I mean, choir and football are the two big things
Yeah.
at the high school level. That's what I hear. I've never taught, high school in Texas, but yeah. So I would say so that the pace of rehearsals, the level of music making that we're doing here, and then my one of the gems of UNT for me is the early music program. The fact that we have that many students who are interested in being in the Baroque ensemble and the choir. It's called Collegium Chamber Ensemble of about 20 to 24 voices. That we did the St. John Passion actually this past year at UNT, and for every solo, we were able to assign a different soloist. I don't know exactly how many solos that is, but we had that many people in the choir who were able to sing Bach at a certain caliber. You know,
Nice.
so
That's good.
that's amazing.
That
That level
is.
of talent that we have here is dumbfounding. I feel very humbled every day.
Yeah, that's amazing. And the Collegium singers, I use Dr. Sparks' video of their Vivaldi Gloria.
Oh yeah.
So we're gonna do, my high school's doing the Vivaldi Gloria this spring, so I'm gonna use that video, but just because it's such an amazing example of what can be accomplished with that
Mm,
score. But that's just another great example from UNT that you're talking about.
yeah.
So let's think. Do you have a favorite musical experience, either as a performer or an audience member?
Yes, I read that question and I was thinking about that. So the first thing that came to mind was, of course, I just got back from the Oregon Bach Festival. And it's funny, actually, I could probably list both from just that experience alone. Getting
Yeah.
to conduct the St. John Passion um, with that caliber of musician was pretty amazing. But I would say even more amazing for me was listening to their performance of the St. Matthew Passion, which was their opening concert. I don't know what it was. I've heard the St. Matthew Passion many times. In fact, we did it with the Dallas Symphony Chorus this past year. And perhaps that's why this experience was so meaningful to me, because I assisted in preparing the Dallas Symphony Chorus with the music. So I was very familiar with the music and the meaning and the translations in a way that I hadn't been previously when I had heard it. So when I was sitting there in the audience, listening to these amazing soloists and gifted obligato instruments and instrumentalists and the always stunning choir, I was on the edge of my seat for the entire 3.5 hours.
Yeah, it's
I
long.
I have never had an experience. I felt like I finally got it. Like I mean, I always knew it was an amazing piece, but I really felt like I was in a meditative experience, like some kind of profound thing. And I didn't want it to end. And when the recits came on, the recitatives, I'd be like, oh my God, what's going to happen next? Even though I obviously know what's going to happen. But it was thrilling. It was so good. I couldn't believe it. And so I couldn't believe it. But I mean, I saw the St. Matthew like staged in Brooklyn once. Like this is the life. So, so that for whatever reason, I think it was having such a deeper understanding of the piece and then getting to like sit back and experience it again as an audience member made it very profound for me. And then I would say as a singer, the first thing that came to mind when you asked that question was actually my experiences with the Westminster Choir
Yeah.
at Westminster Choir College. Those are, I mean, to this day, those are the most profound experiences I've had in a choir in my life.
Yeah.
And why? I'm not sure. I mean, well, I do know I think something about that, it being a choir college, everyone there loves singing in choir. There's no one there who doesn't want to do really, really well. And they're in choral singing, as you know, there is a lending of your voice. It's not just about you coming in as a solo instrument, but it's about you working together with the voices around you. And sometimes that requires compromise in terms of, I don't know, volume, timbre, vibrato is a big one, you know? So,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the singers you see at Westminster are just so willing to do that in a way that I think you have to fight sometimes at other schools to accomplish the same thing. And so imagine we don't have to have that conversation to begin with about like what it means to sing in a choir, because everyone just gets that at Westminster.
Yeah.
And then if you're already coming from that place, imagine the kind of experience you can have because you're working out from that basis. And Dr. McGill was there. He's now at Illinois, but singing for him in Cantorai was an incredibly musical experience. But the Westminster Choir, we had so many performances together throughout the year too, that it made us feel like a family. By the end of the year, it really was a shared experience.
Yeah, they just came down back in January to the Florida Music Educators Association conference.
Oh, that's right. I saw that.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was the first time I've seen them, but I mean, they totally met my expectations. It was unbelievable.
And they were just in Spain at the the big
at the World
World Music Symposium.
Yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, I mean they're definitely a world class ensemble, and that is true. You mentioned you kind of grew together as a family just from the tours and all the performing.
Sheer amount of time you spend together. Oh my gosh! I mean, it's like being in a band. I imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I definitely have experienced that as well. Both being a director and just from being a singer as well. I definitely agree with that. What advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, I love this question because I thought of a student at Mount Holyoke, an aspiring young conductor that I had coffee with recently, who, when I look at her, I see a little me. and she was asked me this question. She was asking for advice. And honestly, what I told her, when I say this, I'm talking to all the people out there who are overeager and overachievers and super hard workers and just want to like be amazing right now or in like 5 minutes or tomorrow. Like that, and especially with conducting, it is a craft that requires you to be a whole musician, and not just a whole musician, but a whole human, right? If we were the best conductor we could be, we would be fluent in like 5 different languages, and we would be amazing music theorists, and we'd be fluent in Schenkerian analysis, and we would be music historians. We would have all the dates memorized of every composer that ever existed, and then on top of that, we'd be amazing sight readers, and we'd have a knowledge of voice pedagogy, and I could go on and on. And also we'd be great therapists for our students, and we'd be comedians, and we'd have to know how to make them laugh. There is so much that goes into being a conductor, some of which I feel can be taught, and some of which I think has to do with your personality, right? But and everyone brings something, of course, beautiful and different to the table. But what I said to her was that, first of all, like, conducting is a lifelong journey. You do not need to know everything by the time you graduate at age 22. I mean, this actually kind of happened to me. So if you live your whole life in pursuit of a goal, and so for me, actually, when I was 23 and working as a choral assistant at Mount Holyoke, my goal in life was to come back to Mount Holyoke and be the director of that program. That was my dream. That was my goal. And then literally 3 years later, I had that. And then I was like, oh no.
Now what? Yeah.
Now what do I do? And also, am I happy? Am I like satisfied? Because how I feel is if you're always working in pursuit of a goal, that is how you will live your entire life. So I think it's more important to, as cliche as it is, to enjoy the journey and be patient with yourself as you're learning different skills. Yes, always be working on something, always be furthering your development in a different area, learning different languages or developing your keyboard skills or whatever else it might be. But I think it's also important to be a human and like have human relationships, and don't live your life with goggles on, not missing, because I think part of what makes beautiful music, what part of, as a conductor, you are a vessel for making music and for moving humanity, right? And you can't do that unless you understand what it means to be human. So I think part of that journey is not always studying your score, and part of that journey is not always studying your music history or whatever else. There's always going to be something to learn, but at the end of the day, you need to say, I've done enough. It's going to be okay. And I have the rest of my life to learn how to be great at this. And I think that's something that I really like about conducting. It's not something you can master. It takes a lifetime to master it. And that's what I said to her. And she felt a lot better.
That's good. You should, you definitely have to tag her on this episode and send it to her. That's great advice. I've said it a bunch of times on this podcast. I am definitely guilty of that. I want to progress, and I want it now. And it's hard to keep yourself, relaxed and to see the long-term span of your life. You might think, oh, I have to wait a year until I can do this thing. That's nothing once you get into really, how long you're gonna potentially live. But
right,
you get so impatient sometimes, and you see, especially now with the internet and what everyone else is doing, and but this person's doing this, but that's they're not you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I actually posted something before the Oregon Bach Festival that I stand by. I have applied to the Oregon Bach Festival. I applied 2 other times, once as a singer, once as a conductor, and got rejected, flat out rejected. And sometimes I wish, as musicians and in the field of conducting especially, we could be more honest about our failures as well as our successes. Because I also think that everyone fails, because frankly, the only difference between someone who's succeeded and someone who's failed is that the person who succeeded failed more times than you did. They just kept going. Right?
Yeah.
So that ability to kind of put yourself out there too and be vulnerable is really important in our field. And I wish we could be more honest about that, about being human, about just trying and failing sometimes and that being okay. And also about like sometimes needing a break, maybe sometimes not doing a summer program and just like being with our family or going on vacation or whatever else we need to do, right? Because honestly, I'm in school right now studying. So as Josh puts it, I'm a nun to the music right now. I feel that way sometimes. And I kind of miss my old life that was very balanced, and I had time to like go to yoga and take walks with my dogs, and now I have an incredibly supportive partner who does all that for me. So, takes care of all the cooking and stuff. But I actually can't wait to get back to a more balanced life. So
yeah, and thank you for being honest and sharing that. I think that's great for anyone really, but especially younger people to hear that there are going to be moments that you are not going to get what you want and you are going to fail. So like myself, I've applied twice to go for the Vancouver Chamber Choir conducting. I got rejected twice. So I've had a similar situation. I still need to apply for the 3rd time, but
yeah, 3rd time's a charm.
I don't know. I don't know when I'm gonna do that, but with my 1.5-year-old daughter, but I'm not gonna give up. So that you've inspired me to rethink that path. So who knows when I'll do that? But yeah, thank you for that.
Oh yeah, just be persistent. Just be annoying, basically. Just keep trying until they're like, oh, this guy.
Yeah.
Better let him in.
Do you have a favorite app?
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a funny question. Honestly, my favorite app is this meditation timer I use. Is that weird? Can I
No?
say that? It's called Insight Timer. I
Okay.
really like it for meditation because the bell sound sounds like a real bell.
Oh, cool.
So as a musician, that's very important to me. I actually am a big podcast listener, though, I would say. So my podcast app, and I listen to Dear Sugar, which is an advice column by Cheryl Strayed, which is pretty fantastic. It just got picked up by the New York Times. And also the podcast On Being, I really like with Krista Tippett, which she interviews different like spiritual people. And not just spirit, like people, scientists, but she talks about the spiritual aspect of what they do. So she's actually had Yo-Yo Ma on there, and she's had Alice Parker.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, oh yeah. I just love. I get inspired every time I listen to that podcast.
That's
But my
great.
favorite app is probably my Insight Timer.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I've never heard of either of those podcasts. I'll definitely have to check those out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I've used there's a podcast that just has guided meditations, and I've used that
Hmm.
before. I used to do it every morning before when I first got to my office at school, and
Oh, good for
it
you.
definitely made a difference. So I hope
Yeah.
that I'm gonna do that again because school starts for me on the 10th for students. I've already started, but
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
it's crazy in Florida.
That's so early.
It
Do you get
is.
early too?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it ends before Memorial Day,
Yeah.
so for school that's early,
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
mean, we're both from, the Northeast, so we're used to school starting after Labor Day.
Yes, that's as it should.
But this summer doesn't really exist here in Florida. It's just
Right.
summer
It's
all the
just fun.
time.
Perpetual.
Yeah.
Perpetual summer. Yeah. Hmm.
Do you have a favorite book?
Yeah, my favorite book right now is called The Dance of the Dissident Daughter. It's a memoir by Sumunk Kid. And I'm a big memoir fan. I could name off a lot of other ones I really like, but I like that one a lot because she talks about I'm going to sound like such a hippie, but she talks about the sacred feminine. She grew up in a conservative Christian household, and it's about she was a very devout religious woman, and it's about her journey, kind of away from that and into a more personal, a feminine inspired spirituality. So that is really speaking to me right now.
Oh, that's great. And
Yeah.
I'll put a link to that book in
Awesome.
the show notes. And so if anyone uses the link and buys the book, I'll get from Amazon, I'll get a small percentage as a kickback, but it won't cost them any extra, and that'll help to bring support for the show. So I'd greatly
Oh, that's
appreciate
really
that.
nice.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah,
yeah.
I
It's
recommend that book, like, also just to any woman who's like coming into, well, or man, but who's like coming into their own. Like, I think it's really a book about empowerment. So, yeah, I hope people buy it. That'd be
sure.
great.
Yeah, that would be great. Other than music, do you have any hobbies?
I do. Well, I have my certification to be a yoga teacher. I have no time to do that right now, but I tried. I'm an overachiever. I tried to teach yoga last semester and I had to stop after like 2 weeks. I'm
Yeah.
like, no. But I do practice quite regularly and I love swimming. There's a great lap pool at Mount Holyoke. I'm sorry, at UNT. I prefer swimming in a lake, but I don't really get to do that here in Texas. And then I love hiking and with my partner, my husband, and traveling and walking my dogs. That's another one I like.
Nice. What kind of dogs do you have?
They're both mutts, but one of them is mostly an Australian cattle dog named Emily Dickinson. And the other one is a black lab mix, and his name is Henry Moose Thoreau Pope Gregory. He has a hyphenated last name. They both do.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great. Can you I'm not sure if you know this or not. Can you talk about your programming for the upcoming season for your choirs?
Yeah, so I'm in a funny position actually right now where I don't have my own ensemble in the fall. I will in the spring again. I'm assisting Dr. Sparks in the fall with University Singers, and then I'll take over in the spring. So I haven't worked out my program for that. It will likely be centered around a piece I commissioned for my wedding, actually, by a living composer, Rena Esmail, who I highly recommend everyone perform her works. Um, but that's about all I know about the spring. I am currently in a 5-voice professional ensemble called Polyphonia, and we do music of the medieval age era and Renaissance. And I am working on programming for that right now. And so this is my first experience not programming in an educational capacity, but in like a professional capacity. So that's been really interesting. So my idea right now is called Frontiers.
Uh-huh.
It's about I was trying to like come up with a theme that would encompass both sacred and secular. And so it's about music that was like cutting edge for the time,
Okay.
or that migrated from one region to another. So for example, in terms of like cutting edge music, I'm basically going to like trace the development of polyphony from chant to 2 parts to a 4-voice parotin thing, and then we're
Yeah.
going to end with a movement of the Michaud mass. And I'll make some like nerdy program note about why I did this, you know. So like tracing the development of polyphony, kind of like the frontier of Western music. And then I'm doing a whole section on Latin American polyphony. So music
Oh,
of the
cool.
High Renaissance that then developed in Mexico and in Central America. So we got some villancicos and some stuff that will sound a lot like Palestrina to you, but was written by, Mexican-born composers. So that's really interesting. And then those are the 2 I've worked on the most. And then the second 2 categories will be secular, and one will probably be the English madrigal, which of course was influenced by the Italian madrigal. And I thought we'd end with Gesualdo,
I was
who,
just about to suggest
yeah,
him.
yeah. So he's going to be the end because he's his own frontier,
He's crazy.
and literally no one picked him up. Like no one else wanted to ride on that train. But his harmonies are amazing. So
Yeah, it's so
that's
bizarre.
what I'm working on right now. Actually, I'm in the thick of that. Does it sound good? Do you think
No,
you'd
that's great. Now, yeah, I was literally just about to say, if you're thinking about the frontier,
Yeah.
Gesualdo just is on another planet compared to everyone
Exactly.
else around
He is
him.
so trippy. Exactly. We call him a cul-de-sac composer in my choral lit class.
What does that mean?
Because like a cul-de-sac goes nowhere. It's
Oh,
he's like in his own little area off to the side, while we've got like cusp composers, like people who are on the cusp between 2 eras, like Monteverdi. So
okay.
it's in between the Renaissance and the Baroque. And then you've got the culminators, so that's like Bach and Handel. And then
Nice.
you've got like the cul-de-sac of the Renaissance, which is Gesualdo all in its.
Oh, there you go. You could do a project, make a timeline, but put it into like Google Maps,
Yeah.
and then put each composer under their like road section or something. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know.
It could be creative when I'm studying for my qualifying exams. Maybe I'll
Yeah.
do it.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. What's the best place for people to get in contact with you?
Oh, for people to get in contact, I don't know. What have past people done? Should I get like my Facebook or
You can do like
like
Twit. Do you have
email?
Twitter?
I don't have Twitter.
Oh,
Should I
Twitter?
get it? Are
Yeah.
all the hip people doing that? I'm gonna have a website soon, but it is not up yet. So,
Okay.
um,
Well,
but
when it is up, send me an email and I'll add it to the show notes on my website,
that sounds great.
and so that'll be up there.
But if there's anyone who is like a super fan and wants to like talk more with me for whatever reason, they can feel free to friend me on Facebook.
Well, there you go.
I regret saying that.
Who knows? We'll find out.
Okay.
Well,
For
Lindsay,
now, that's
yeah.
all.
Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Oh, thanks, Zach. This has been great. It's nice to hear your voice and hear that you're doing so well too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Choir Conductor podcast. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave a review. Go to zackthompsonmusic.weebly.com for show notes, an archive of podcast episodes, and free compositions. Have a great week.